All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership October webinar. We are extraordinarily privileged to have Dr. Teddie Potter with us here today to share a presentation called Adaptation During Multi-System Failure, Lessons from Planetary Health. My name is Dr. Heidi Roop, and I am an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota, and I work in partnership with MCAP, and I'm standing in for Joel Larson today as the host of the webinar. Just one quick logistical piece here, as I navigate my own logistics. I'll be moderating a Q&A session, and every participant on this webinar today is currently muted. You can use the Q&A feature in your taskbar to send any questions, and you can also, if you follow that along during the presentation, you can upvote any questions that you think are particularly interesting, and we'll ask those in the Q&A at the end of the presentation. I will stop sharing my screen. Teddie, you can pull yours up while I introduce you. So today we have Dr. Teddie Potter with us. She's deeply committed to climate change education and has an impressive track record of advancing adaptation both in Minnesota and beyond. She has co-founded the Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. She's the member in the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments and is a member of the American Academy of Nursing Environment and Public Health Expert Panel. She's a member of the coordinating committee of Columbia University's Global Consortium on Climate and Health Education and a fellow at the Institute on the Environment here at the University of Minnesota. She chairs the Clinicians for Planetary Health and is a member of the steering committee for the Planetary Health Alliance at Harvard. At the University of Minnesota, Dr. Potter designed and co-teaches an interdisciplinary course called the Global Climate Challenge, Creating an Empowered Movement for Change. In addition, she co-leads the Health Sciences Initiative called Climate Change and Health in Interprofessional Response. In 2019, Dr. Potter was appointed the first director of Planetary Health for the School of Nursing at the University of Minnesota. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I really look forward to your presentation. And with that, I will mute my mic and listen. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and it's a privilege to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. I must say that given that this topic is so near and dear to my heart, I wish I could see all of you. I wish I could see all the people that are on this call and just give a nod to you and know that we're in this work together, that we're not alone, that we're doing the best we can, and that we can learn from one another. So that being said, I hope as we open it up to Q&A, you ask questions. Perhaps you use the chat to, if that's available, to share some of your own work or your own ideas about how we move forward, because this is an all hands on deck moment and we need to find each other and link arms and move ahead. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about planetary health, which is a new and emerging field, but it's also a very ancient field when we acknowledge the indigenous leaders that always knew about the health of the planet and how we live sustainably in our environment. So first of all, I want to pause or take a moment to honor all those who care. Certainly we are seeing multi-system failure in a lot of our patients that are suffering from COVID-19. And the care providers that are having to manage this, I want to honor that they are on the front lines of this, this pandemic. I also want to acknowledge the firefighters that are on the front lines of another epidemic, and that is the either the firefighters or the people that are doing search and rescue, or the people that are saving folks from hurricanes. They too are on the front lines of this emerging pandemic that we're talking about, and this is our environmental collapse. And then finally, I want to acknowledge the people that see that our current social structures and patterns of systemic racism have to be challenged. And they too are on the front lines of recognizing that we're at a massive moment of change in our society. And I want to celebrate and honor the work that they are doing. So pandemics follow the fault lines of society. Excuse me, and I think we're seeing that right now. The COVID-19 pandemic in the United States in particular is revealing massive disparities of who has access to care, what type of care do people receive, what type of information do people receive, what type of science do people have access to. And so we're at a key moment. I like this quote from my hero, John Muir, that says, when we try to pick anything apart by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And that's really what we're talking about in today's session of this is all hitched together, and we need to come together to be talking about how we move forward. So in the healthcare field, I am a nurse. In the healthcare field, we would say what's happening in our world right now is multi-system failure. When a patient is in multi-system failure, they have a condition, oftentimes sepsis or something like that, where the kidneys are shutting down, the heart's shutting down, the lungs are shutting down, the liver's shutting down. Everything is collapsing at the same time. And we're finding that is the situation with the earth right now. It's a multi-system failure. And in human care, you cannot operate as a lone provider when somebody's in multi-system failure. If a cardiologist comes in and tries to run everything, it doesn't work because you need the cardiologist, the pulmonologist, the nephrologist, the hepatologist. You need all the care team, the nurses, the therapists, you need social workers, you need chaplains, you need people, the family certainly, who's making tough decisions. And so we're at that moment regarding our planet. And so that's what I want to talk about. But before I go much further, I want to share a story. A few years back, I had an opportunity to be a panelist at the National Climate Adaptation Conference, and it was fabulous, fabulous conference. I've also attended numerous Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership conferences, and those are always fabulous and inspiring. But what I walked away from the national conference with was this sense of, holy cow, there is so much more that is known and so many more actions that are happening behind the scenes to stabilize the environment, to adapt to the environment, to deal with water issues, forestry issues, etc. And why don't all of the citizens know this? Why don't we know this? Why aren't we privileged to this information? And when I got to thinking about it, I thought it's because, oh, it's that old story again. That old story that basically says, and is very patronizing and paternalistic, you don't need to know everything. We will deal with it. You just go about your business and stay calm. And I think that's an old story that has to disappear, in that the issues are so huge and so big. We need every person working on this. We can't assume that the experts are only those who are in the academy or the scientists or in politics. The experts are each of us, every family, every neighborhood, every community. It has expertise in their own area and how they want to work through this. So the rest of the talk is going to be about changing our narrative, moving us from this old patronizing way, paternalistic way that we still hear today. Messages about, you don't have to pay attention to what COVID's doing. Just go about your business. We'll take care of it. We've seen that that's not working particularly, and it's the same with our Earth right now. So we're going to talk about a different message, and I want to share an example of the new message. And this is from the 100% campaign. Many of you probably got this postcard in the mail, but I wanted to highlight just how different the message is. It isn't stay calm and carry on. It's be informed and let's get busy transforming our systems and creating a healthier future for all of us. And so that's what I think Planetary Health has to offer us. So how did we get here? How did we get in this mess? Some of these slides are from the Planetary Health Alliance, and so I want to acknowledge their work around this. But how did we get here? We made decisions that did, in fact, help human health. So we've had tremendous public health gains over the last decades. Infant mortality is decreasing, life expectancy is increasing. And so those are things to be celebrated and recognized and cheered. But a lot of these things have happened at the sacrifice of the earth, and so we've made decisions based on these health outcomes, but we haven't considered the impact on the Earth's health. So human-caused environmental disruptions are occurring with loss of biodiversity and biodiversity shifts. We're seeing biogeochemical flow changes. We're seeing land use and land cover changes, certainly global pollution, climate change, and depletion of natural resources. All of these are system collapses or indications of a multi-system failure. We also have seen the contribution of and the impact of exponential growth in population. So this little chart shows you just how our population has skyrocketed. And along with that skyrocketing population, obviously, is increased pressure on water, on our forests, and increased patterns of consumption. In fact, in the last 50 years, as short a time ago as 50 years ago, in 1970, we were pretty much living in balance. And by living in balance, I mean we used what the resources that the Earth was able to renew in 1 year's time. We were in balance with use and renewal, basically. Well, look at what's happened over time with our population growth and our massive increase of consumption. Right around August 1st is when we use up what the Earth is able to produce. And now, in fact, we're at a point where we're using 1.6 Earths to maintain our current standard of living. I do find it interesting that our decreased air travel, decreased shipping costs of things from across the ocean have extended that time frame. But you sometimes hear the story of we've made remarkable strides in 2020 related to COVID as far as our behavior shifting and changing. Not really. We've maybe gained 3/4 of a month on this overshoot problem. So we still have a lot of work to do. So it's our entire ecological system that's changing and not just climate change. And that's where I want to be very clear. I started as a climate activist, but there was something just sort of niggling at me as a nurse. And I realized that I was putting emphasis on alleviation of a symptom rather than addressing the root cause. And as I started looking at the root cause, yes, I went to burning of fossil fuels and consumption patterns, et cetera. But I began to realize that as I went upstream with my canoe and my paddle, that the root cause was much more connected to many, many, many things going on. And that I wanted to be as far upstream as possible to try to address these, because it is loss of forest and it is our rapidly disappearing biodiversity. And the ocean is changing and the land is changing and air, soil, and water qualities are changing. Rivers are drying up. We're having extreme weather events. And so it is climate, but that climate is not the whole story. And I wanted to move as far as I could. And the reason I wanted to move as far as I could is because I'm a nurse and all of these issues impact human health and add to human suffering. So I am concerned about the suffering of all life on the planet. I'm concerned about the suffering of the planet, but I'm also concerned about the health impacts that our degradation and disruption of natural systems has for human health. So we know that these are happening right now. Certainly you see different balances of them and issues depending on which state you live in. but we're seeing cardiovascular disease issues, especially around exposure to heat and how that's impacting people with underlying conditions. And now you add COVID on top of that. So people have to, in the, particularly like the desert Southwest, go into shelters where they can get adequate cooling experiences, but then they're in shelters with other people, and then their risk of COVID transmission goes up. We're seeing increases in respiratory diseases like asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. These zoonotic changes and diarrheal diseases related to vector changes and zoonotic cross animal changes, which we would put pandemics in there. And we are teed up right now for a wave of pandemics. Not that I want to be gloom and doom, but I do want to be telling the truth. This is not a stay calm and carry on moment. This is a be informed and let's get working on this moment. Antimicrobial resistance has been a long time issue, toxic and dioxin exposures, and you can see the rest of the list. All of these are issues that we are concerned about related to human health. So in essence, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Lancet Commission on Planetary Health, when they established this relatively new and emerging field, said, we have mortgaged the health of future generations to realize economic and developmental gains in the present. And the payment is coming due now. In the early times, we were saying, isn't this great? And now we realize that we have a whole debt to pay. In fact, that debt became very evident in the Lancet Countdown paper, which is an annual report that they published in 2019. And they said the life of every child born today will be profoundly affected by climate change, with populations around the world increasingly facing extremes of weather, food, and water insecurity, changing patterns of infectious disease, and a less certain future. Without accelerated intervention, this new era will come to define the health of people at every stage of their lives. That means you can't get a buy from this. You cannot escape this. You can't say, oh, I only work with children, or I only work with elders, or I only work with in an acute care intensive care unit. Every person born today will suffer health consequences of climate change. And this hits home, folks. This picture in the back is a picture of my son holding my first grandchild. And so this is immediate, this is now, this is people that we love that are born today. So what is planetary health? Many of you are well aware of public health, which is concerned about the health of humans in the context for which we live. Eco-health is the health of the environment. One health is the awareness that we have zoonotic diseases and illnesses where the diseases of one animal impact the health of humans. Global health certainly addresses health outcomes and sustainable development goals and all the work trying to create sustainability at a global level. And why I have chosen or adopted planetary health as sort of the area of work that I'm doing is planetary health is an umbrella that holds all these other aspects. So I don't want people to feel like, shoot, I have been working on one health, now I need to choose and learn something new. Not at all. We still need experts in the awareness of the shared health between animals and humans. What planetary health does that the others don't do quite as much of is it calls humans to task. It says, look at folks, we are disrupting the environment. It's not just being disrupted on its own. It's not natural cycles or patterns. We are causing all of the degradation and the disruption that you see. And so we need to be involved in creating a solution. So we refer to this as the great transition in that we need to do nearly everything differently. And that's why I like so much the 100% campaign image of we need to learn and adapt together on this. So we need to look at how we produce foods, how we consume products, how we manufacture products, the energy we use, What are our cities going to look like? How do we construct them? How do we live in balance with our natural landscapes? And they use the word resources here, and I'd like to even shy away from thinking of the natural environment as a resource and more as a member, a relationship, a relation within the ecosystem. And then the stories that we tell about our place in the world. Are humans free to use everything until it disappears? What is our relationship with nature? And what does it mean to live the good life? All of this has to be re-examined and looked at. So that means this great transition time calls all of us forward. Every single field is needed. Every single specialty or level of expertise is needed. There isn't one group of people that should be excluded or marginalized or not fully present in this great transition. So again, I love this idea. I think it brings tremendous hope that we have a chance to perhaps redesign our relationship with one another, our cities, how we live, our relationship with food, our relationship with the rest of the members of the planet. How do we do this? And it gets at the core problem. And as I said, it offers a core solution. So I want to talk about some things I'm learning at or have valued at the U. Last summer, I had a chance to speak at the United Nations Civil Society Conference. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals, number 17 to be specific, is partnership for the goals. That we cannot make or create a sustainable outcome unless we work across boundaries, across disciplines, and invite everybody to the table. So I want to highlight some things that are happening around the university. Certainly my home, which is the School of Nursing, our mission now is to prepare future health leaders to work on the health of humans and the health of the planet. We've embedded that into our core mission and our curriculum. And we're teaching students to recognize and understand these connections. I love the Grand Challenge movement at the University of Minnesota, the Grand Challenge curriculum and Grand Challenge research, which brings us together and forces us to work across lines. So I've been teaching, this spring will be the 6th year, a Grand Challenge course entitled Global Climate Change Empowering a Movement. And we teach the students how to create a very empowered and effective social movement for change. And I teach, as I said, I'm a nurse. I teach with a soil microbiologist and a fish and wildlife conservation professor. So the students get to see 3 different ways of thinking, 3 forms of knowledge, 3 ways of approaching science. They get to see it in action. They get to see how you have respectful dialogues when you disagree. How do we support one another? What types of aha ideas do we have because we work across disciplines? The Institute on the Environment certainly does spectacular work, both in the area of research, sustainability, preparing future sustainability leaders. If you're not familiar with their work, I strongly encourage you to take a look at what they do and the people that are involved in that. And finally, the Center for the Early Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing has some wonderful open access, free well-being resources that help people strengthen themselves either through cooking classes or meditation classes to be the best we can possibly be for this great transition, not to ignore what's happening, but to get us as strong and centered and focused and healthy as possible to be working together. I also want to draw attention to, we had a project where we worked with various representatives from the health sciences at the University of Minnesota to create climate change curriculum. And this all started because the students approached us and they said, we've got a problem. We are not learning about climate change and the impact of climate change. And so we actually surveyed the students and we said, how many of you believe that you need climate change content in order to practice as a future provider in a way that is not negligent or malpractice? How many of you think you need this content in order to care for people? And the vast majority of students said they needed the content. And then our next question was, and how much of this content are you currently getting in your health science education? And it was just bare bones minimum. Some of them said nothing. So we were able to then take that information to the deans of the health sciences and say, look at our consumers, our stakeholders, our students are feeling that we are not serving them well. We want to create climate change content to be embedded across the curriculum of the health sciences. So each school, each dean appointed a climate champion for their school. The climate champions got together and we created interprofessional climate curriculum for the health sciences. We chose to have that located in the Center for Global Health and Social Responsibility. So that's a neutral place. If it was if it was only housed in the School of Nursing, other professions might not find their way to our website. So we wanted a neutral site. And it's open access, peer reviewed slide deck material that can be used by anyone. In fact, it's been picked up by the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal as a model for where we need to move. Medical students around the world are using it as a resource. And this just all started here at the University of Minnesota. And you too can gain access by going to the Center for Global Health and Social Responsibility. I also want to share a brief story with you of another movement. And this is a personal movement that got launched a few years back. It started when I attended the People's Climate March in 2014, leading up to one of the big Congress of the People events. And 500,000 people were in New York City for this march. And we were given basically one directive, and that was at 12 noon, we want everyone to be quiet and raise your arms in the air for 2 minutes. And unbelievably, it was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. As a matter of fact, I heard birds chirping in Central Park, which was about a half a block away. So it was incredible, 500,000 people doing this. And after 2 minutes had passed, a roar started from the back of the parade and moved and rippled down the entire extent of the march until it reached the people in the front, and the march started. And I remember thinking simple directions to people with a shared vision are absolutely possible. Then a few years later, when we started the course that I teach that I mentioned, we use it as a textbook drawdown, which is from Project Drawdown, which is the most comprehensive plan to reverse global warming. Exceptional book. And the reason we chose that is we wanted our students' actions and plans to be grounded in solutions that were both science-based and were at the adequate scale. So we didn't want them thinking that going around the house and simply changing out their light bulbs was adequate to the task at hand, that it would really address things at the level that was needed. We needed to scale things and scale things quickly. So I began to think, I wonder if we could use the voice of nurses to scale these solutions. And the reason I say that is back at the parade, this is a picture of me years ago. I carried a sign. I didn't have white lab coat on. I didn't have a stethoscope around my neck. The only thing that indicated I was a nurse was the sign I carried, and it said Minnesota Nurses for a Healthy Future. And I can't tell you the number of times people came out of the sidelines where they were viewing the march, and they said, the nurses are here, the nurses are here. I had people rushing out and taking selfies with me. I had people saying, oh, I can hardly wait to tell my mom or my aunt. I mean, it was the most bizarre experience I've ever had. because they weren't doing that for my colleagues. Folks weren't rushing out and saying, oh, the teachers are here, or the engineers are here. There was something about nurses that caught people's attention. So I began to wonder or think, could we use the status of nurses, and if you don't pay attention as much as I do, for the ever since 2000, nurses, except for 1 year, nurses have been ranked the most trusted profession by the Gallup poll, annual Gallup poll. And we outpace other professions by numerous points. So nobody even comes close except 2001, when firefighters came after 911, were number one. But after that, nurses have always been number one. So could we leverage the trust that people put in us to scale the drawdown solutions? I pitched it to Project Drawdown. I said, I think nurses, we can activate the global nursing body of nurses and start to work on scaling this. And so that's what we've done. We've created Nurses Drawdown, which is a global movement to empower nurses, empower all people to start to draw down greenhouse gases. We chose of the 100 plus solutions that Project Drawdown has on its site, we chose options that have co-benefits of by doing this action, we draw down greenhouse gases and we improve the health of people. So we chose food because certainly nutrition is a huge part of health. We're really promoting plant-based diets in the global south and other places that don't have access to electricity. We want to see a transition to clean burning cook stoves, so we won't be promoting deforestation. And definitely in the northern areas or Western world and developed nations, we want to be moving towards reduced food waste. Mobility is huge. We want to encourage adequate bike infrastructure, so cities really create ways for bikes to be used. We want walkable cities and safe places for people to walk. And we know from research that benches that are strategically placed encourage more walking, and especially for people who have underlying conditions. And now we're seeing the importance of getting outside and being mobile with COVID-19 and the decreased rate of transmission when people are a bit healthier. Also encouraging mass transit. Gender equity is a surprising greenhouse gas solution, but they have found that when we really work on education of girls and adequate access to knowledge about family choices, the cultures where women are adequately empowered, they also improve their economic status, and there's decreased issues around use of scarce resources such as firewood, etc. Energy, we're promoting energy efficiency and a transition to clean energy sources. And this is, we know that the healthcare system itself, the healthcare organizations, are one of the largest or producers of greenhouse gases. So we can't hold the healthcare system up as a role model by any means. We're a big part of the problem. Nature-based solutions, really getting in and encouraging people to plant trees, protecting our tropical forests and protecting our forests that are around us. And so nurses are on the move, and I wanted to share with you before I turn things over, the whole idea of shifting this story. So for physicians, they have long entered their profession by stating the Hippocratic Oath. And recently the Lancet, which is our major healthcare journal, said to a group of us, we think it's time that the Hippocratic Oath transitions to a planetary health pledge or planetary health oath. And we really worked very, very carefully to see that this pledge was interprofessional, that it wasn't just a physician oath anymore, that it became an oath for all health providers. So I'm going to play the School of Nursing's response to this, and we'll see if it works, and hopefully you can hear this.
I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the service of humanity and to the protection of natural systems on which human health depends.
The health of people, their communities, and the planet will be my first consideration, and I will maintain the utmost respect for human life, as well as reverence for the diversity of life on Earth.
I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity, and in accordance with good practice, taking into account planetary health values and principles.
To do no harm, I will respect the autonomy and dignity of all persons in adopting an approach to maintaining and creating health which focuses on prevention of harm to people and planet.
I will respect and honor the trust that is placed in me and leverage this trust to promote knowledge, values, and behaviors that support the health of humans and the planet.
I will actively strive to understand the impact that direct, unconscious, and structural bias may have on my patients, communities, and the planet, and for cultural self-awareness in my duty to serve.
I will advocate for equity and justice by actively addressing environmental, social, and structural determinants of health while protecting the natural systems that underpin a viable planet for future generations.
I will acknowledge and respect diverse sources of knowledge and knowing regarding individual, community, and planetary health, such as from indigenous traditional knowledge systems, while challenging attempts at spreading disinformation that can undermine planetary health.
I will share and expand my knowledge for the benefit of society and the planet. I will also actively promote transdisciplinary, inclusive action to achieve individual, community, and planetary health.
I will attend to my own health and well-being and abilities in order to provide care and serve the community to the highest standards.
I will strive to be a role model for my patients and society by embodying planetary health principles in my own life, acknowledging that this requires maintaining the vitality of our common home.
I will not use my knowledge to violate human rights and civil liberties, even under threat, recognizing that the human right to health necessitates maintaining planetary health.
I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor. By taking this pledge, I am committing to a vision of personal, community, and planetary health that will enable the diversity of life on our planet to thrive now and in the future.
So my question for you is, how will you participate in the great transition? There isn't one field, one area of knowing, one area of being that is not necessary for us to create this great transition to a thriving future. I would like to just stop my screen share at this point. I do have resources available, and I believe those will be available to you after the talk. But now it's your time, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Teddie. That was wonderful. I was taking lots of notes, so I appreciate that. We do have a few, this is a time where if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I will just say the primary questions coming in around resources, so that resource list is handy. So we will work to compile and share those out with you. So if you wouldn't mind people are asking us to aggregate the resources, but it looks like from your slides, you've already provided those. So if you could send those our way, we'll get those out to attendees. So thank you very much. Yeah, and if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A.
I also want people to be aware that April 20th to the 25th, I believe that those are the dates without looking it up, is the Planetary Health Alliance Conference, which is an international conference. It was going to be in Sao Paulo, but it's virtual this year. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you to get in and hear talks from the leading thought leaders and scientists about planetary health and how we bring about this great transition. So stay tuned, and I'm sure as information rolls out, we can get that to you.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions coming in. There was one, which is, why is it planetary health rather than planet health?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how that started. I think the original thought was we wanted to move away from people seeing that and thinking, oh, they're talking about Neptune or just Earth or Venus or Mars, and really get to, yes, it's the health of our planet, but it's a much bigger ecosystem. It's the ecosystem on the planet. It's not just the health of the heavenly body, the planetary system.
Great. And we have another question. What can you share and provide for encouragement for parents with children during this time? I imagine that's a multi-layered response.
It's a multi-layered response, and I really thank you, whoever asked that question, because these are critical times. These are really urgent times, as you know, and it depends on the age of your child. So developmentally, I'm going to sort of walk you through. If you have an infant or a toddler, cherish them, love them, hold them, and get them out in nature. Get them out looking at things, exploring things, seeing things as much as you can. Get them loving nature. And as school age kids, they're going to be starting to learn things. So you want to hear, what did they learn? What has science been teaching them? And then how can you have a family discussion about what is the science telling us? I really urge you to give your children messages that science is something to be trusted. It is a process, a neutral process that helps us move ahead as a species. We wouldn't have good medicine, our good medicines without science. We wouldn't have our understanding of the Earth's systems without science. So science is something that it doesn't belong to one group of people or another group of people. It is a thought process that allows us to uncover the best knowledge at that point in time to help us move forward. And does it shift and change? Absolutely. Good science should be evolving. It will shift as each person asks a new question and adds to the amount of knowledge that's out there, but it can be trusted. So kids need to know that, because they'll be getting a different message. The kids that are a little older, I would say you might have some dialogues about how can our family, how can the people in our unit live in ways that are not causing harm to the planet. What choices can we make? Let's go grocery shopping together. Let's look at products. Let's look at how far away were they shipped. Are we able to eat locally? Are we able to eat seasonally? We'll look at the chemicals on the packaging. What does that mean for us? So starting to get them thinking to this level. And then teenagers really are chomping at the bit to be active and be agents of change. So it's helping them understand, how do you decide which movements are reputable, which things that you read about on social media really are organizations that are ethical and inclusive, that they share the values of our family. How do you choose where to get active, and then model that as adults as well. I want to get away from children ever thinking that they're alone or that it falls on their shoulders to solve this massive crisis that we're in. I think it is the role of adults to say, I am here, I'm doing what I can, I will tell you what I can do. And when it's something we can do together, absolutely, let's do it together. But it doesn't just fall on you pull the planet out of this very difficult time. That's it's a hard balance to strike, and you have to strike it with kids and basically every adult as well. Is if we don't talk about it, people don't participate in the solution. So that's why that stay calm and carry on message is just, it's got to go. It's just got to go. People need to know how critically ill our system is right now, so that they can choose to participate with their talents, skills, and knowledge and begin to help turn things around. So we want to give people enough knowledge about what's happening, enough resources to understand we don't have a heck of a lot of time to really activate a robust transformation of our society. But at the same time, you don't want to go so far that people plunge into depression and don't get active. It's just, it's over, there's nothing I can do, it's too big. Then we've swung too far, and we've lost again the participants in this system redesign. So it's finding that spot. And people sometimes ask me, Teddie, now that you know what you know, but you've read the reports, you know all the research, aren't you just living in total despair? And my response is, since mid-February, I've actually never been more hopeful, which is kind of a strange thing to say in the midst of this syndemic, all these intersecting pandemics. But for the first time in a very, very long time, I'm seeing enough people wake up, that enough people are starting to say, oh my gosh, we have a problem on our hands. We need to redesign things. If only one part of the system is failing, everybody else sort of goes to the healthy parts, the parts that are still functioning, and they block out that this is failing. Now the entire system is collapsing, and they can't block it out. And they're saying, what do I do? Help me. What do I do? How do I get involved? And that is where what gives me hope is people, I'm hearing that over and over again. What can I do? How can I participate? So I'd give kids that message.
So we have lots of good questions coming in, and there's one that sort of, I think, aligned well with that response, which is that, so it says, you rightly argue that everyone must be involved, but everyone is a lot of people, places, and organizations. So what sorts of organizations do you think can best coordinate the work of such a large range of people and ideas?
We're asking the same question. So thank you. I wish I had the answer to that. What we're trying to do is almost do like a family tree mapping of who's doing what and how do we coalesce? How do we find each other and don't duplicate in this very critical and urgent time, making sure that the organization stays true to its unique contribution, which is a different way of thinking. The old story had everything in ranked hierarchies, and only certain contributions were important and others weren't. And we're trying to reboot that to a partnership and an understanding of it's all needed. So if you are an educator, K-12 educator, now is not your time to jump ship and become active in, I don't know, another aspect of the movement. You need to look at the K-12 education and curriculum design and how we're bringing our students forward to adapt and be aware of these changes. That's your work. And then when you then build a network of people that are doing the other work. So when something crosses my path, I can take a look at it and go, you know what? Thank you for this invitation to speak or write a chapter or be on a co-author a paper. But I know somebody in my network that would be far better. This is my contribution, and this is what I'm good at. This is what I can do. And so we begin to start moving back and forth these pieces to each other. How do you find each other? I would say that starting with like the Planetary Health Alliance is a really good way. You can sign up for newsletters. If you're a health professional or anybody in the health field, we have Clinicians for Planetary Health where you can join that. It kind of depends on your area of work. I know that Minnesota 350 does fabulous work. Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light does wonderful work. There's just a lot of really exciting things happening. If you're stuck and aren't quite sure, I think at the University of Minnesota, probably the Institute on the Environment has its hand on the pulse of what's happening, at least regionally. And it's a very good entry point for, here I'm coming, here's my abilities, how do I get started? But we need to organize and organize quickly.
Great. So that's another great segue. So one of the questions here is sort of how can we, given that this is such a big challenge and that the time is now, how can we reduce resistance to change and get more people engaged? So I think you kind of outlined this, but I think acknowledging the sort of barrier to entry.
That's a great question. And I really want to draw people's attention to a structure or a framework that's used in organizing a lot, and it's called Spectrum of Allies. And you can even just look it up and you'll see an image of it. And basically the spectrum of allies is this arch. And you've got active allies, passive allies, people who are neutral, passive opponents, and active opponents. The active allies are the folks that are boots on the ground, they're already doing the work. So if you don't know who they are, you want to find them, you want to join forces, you want to have a shared language and a shared effort. That'll help you transition policies, have more sort of effective use of resources, and really be working together. Then the next group you want to go to is the passive allies, the folks that know that we need to do something, we need to do it now, but they don't know what to do. Find them and help invite them into the movement, and to whatever extent they would need to be involved, want to be involved, and find a way, a simple way for them to start. Then the neutral people, they start getting wobbly. Once they start to see that the active allies and passive allies are large enough, they start to go, oh, maybe I'll swing over. The passive opponents are folks that aren't doing any damage to you, but they are against your work. Sometimes they swing over, and very often they'll be slower folks. They'll be laggards in the movement. They'll come. The active opponents, so I really want to draw your attention to them. They're the ones that speak against you, discredit you, try to dismantle your work at every step of the path. Ignore them. Ignore them. Because it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, you are never going to pull them over and transform them. So ignore them, because you're concerned about an action and a movement. You want as many of these people as possible. These folks who are out to destroy the movement, ignore it. And what do we tend to do? When you're excited about something, we tend to go to the naysayers first. We say, if only I can convince Uncle Joe that this is real and this is important, things will change and improve. Sorry, Uncle Joe has always been against this. He has never wanted to support you. He's never even been kind to you. Just forget about Uncle Joe. Talk about potatoes and turkey at Thanksgiving. Do whatever you have to do just to avoid the topic, because he's just not going to swing over. So I think that's a really important model for all of us. Find your allies. Find the allies, then invite people in who want to get involved, and then start creating this movement.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to all the questions, so we'll try to get through a couple more here. So one question was, how is the Planetary Health Pledge that you played for us, and also the resources that are being used to support that, getting out to healthcare providers? It seems like public service announcements or other sort of dissemination to the general public would also be critical to establish the connection between that healthcare includes planetary health. So maybe just how are you connecting these resources?
So this is a global pledge. We have leaders all over the globe who are pushing this out in their networks and through their work. It is published in the Lancet. It's an open access article. So I think you have to register to be on the Lancet's website, but you can download it, you can use it. We are really encouraging people to take it up. At the University of Minnesota, I have a meeting coming up where we're talking about all the health science students together. Once we can get together, potentially saying it on like Northrop's steps and really getting that message out. And then it's up to you folks. You've seen it today, you've heard it today, you're gonna get access to this information. Talk to people about this. Share that news with other people in your circles.
Great. All right. And because I'm interested as well, I want to try to get through a couple more questions here. So we have a question here that's, so our current agricultural system is disastrous for people, water, climate, and biodiversity. So how are nurses talking about promoting diets that are based in sustainably raised grass-fed animals, organically grown produce, and low in damaging carbs, sugar, and toxins? So sort of how is our food, the conversation around food, being integrated into the conversation around our health and planetary health?
And absolutely, I appreciate that person that asked, and clearly you are an expert, and I would invite you to be part of my network so I can turn to you and say, how should we be doing this? Because I know how to reach the nurses, but I don't necessarily have, we have the beginning information of how we move in this direction. And how we encourage people. We had a long dialogue about, do we encourage everybody to be a vegan or vegetarian? And we're looking for movement again, inviting as many people as possible in, and how do we start that transition? And your knowledge set is absolutely spot on about where we need to go. But that's where we need to have transdisciplinary publications and transdisciplinary conferences, so we all hear what's going on in each other's fields and then can bring that back to the home base and basically share it with everybody else. So show up at the Planetary Health Alliance conference in April, and we'll see if we can't plug you in with others that can help. Or think about, we do have poster sessions, and if you have information you can contribute in a poster, let's see if we can share that.
Okay, great. And I'm going to ask you one more question that you won't be able to go a full response in the time, but I think it's an important one to note. And so there is a mention of the importance of justice and anti-racism movements in the connection with climate action. What organizations coming from the anti-racism movement are working actively to foster global justice and not just US justice? So thinking about it as a planetary system.
Right, and that is a wonderful question and an important question. Even though my area of expertise is emerging scholarship around planetary health, it really is nursing expertise, and so I don't have an adequate answer to that question. I think you could potentially contact the Planetary Health Alliance and say, what would your recommendation be? Where should we go? They have actual regional hubs around the world, and the hubs are working locally to make changes and to support planetary health along all those principles, as you say, justice, equity, etc. So I would not claim knowledge in that area, but I certainly know there's experts that you can ask. And the Planetary Health Alliance is wonderful about it. If they don't have the answer, they've got many people in their alliance. It's an alliance of over 240 organizations. So programs like Health and Harmony, which does amazing work with by doing reforestation, you actually improve the economy of the local people, which protects the forest and improves the health of the people. So lots of exciting work going on. You can click on those various members, see what work they're up to, look at them on a website, see who you want to pull in. But it's a vast and robust network of people that are doing this work.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to make sure to respect everyone's time for our close at 1 p.m. I'll be putting a link in the chat and also pull up a concluding slide here to ask your evaluation and feedback for today's session, and also ideas for subsequent webinars that we might provide that are of use to you and your work in this space. So thank you so much, Teddie, for the very thoughtful and thought-provoking presentation, and for your lovely answers to all of these questions and the abundance of resources and connections that you provided for us all. So I look forward to collating those resources with you and sharing those more broadly. And thank you to everyone who attended today for listening in and for all of those wonderful detailed questions that you offered. So I'm going to pull up this slide with our with a link to our survey evaluation, and we really would appreciate any feedback so that can help us improve our next programming. And with that, we'll close out for today, and hope to talk with you and connect with you all again soon.
Thank you, everyone.